Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Today we have one of my good friends and another coach in the industry, Natalie Guevara, joining me for our new quarterly chats that we're going to do together to kind of just talk about some of the things that we're seeing as far as our clients and things that will be helpful for you moving forward. And so today's topic we're going to be talking about is really navigating those seasons of rest versus pushing yourself and really when to know what is best for you. And it's going to take some time to really figure this out. This isn't like a foolproof, do these three things and you're going to be able to tell. It's going to take a lot of time and practice and creating more self-compassion around this process. And so I'm really excited because I think this is a very useful topic, especially this time of the year. And I think you guys will find a lot of value in it. Hello, Miss Natalie. I am
Hello.
so excited about this topic because I think that it's a season that both you and I are experiencing personally, and a season that I think probably a lot of our clients are going through as well. And just navigating that balance, I think, can be challenging for a lot of people. So, the main things we're going to talk about today are just navigating this season of rest versus when to push yourself. So I'd love for you to maybe share like what your season kind of looks like right now. Obviously, you have a very little one over there, and I'm sure that that kind of throws things off, and how you're practicing grace and navigating that season would be awesome to hear.
So in this week's check-ins, I had so many clients reaching out and they were like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed and burned out. And one client, and specifically something that I really resonated with was like, I'm trying to put my oxygen mask on first. And for those that are listening that are a mom, it's like, okay, but are we ever actually going to do that? Like if the plane's going down, I'm definitely going to be putting the oxygen mask on my little ones before myself. So it got me to really thinking about this season and what slowing down and somewhat putting that oxygen mask on first actually does look like. And I shared with several of my clients, this is a hard thing for me to navigate and to move through. So I am definitely not anywhere near perfect at it. But, reflecting on seasons where maybe I should have slowed down. A good example was when I gave birth in July. I was working less than 24 hours after giving birth in a hospital bed. So slowing down is not something that I am accustomed to. So I would say really for me, what this is looking like and what I'm experiencing is a practice. And it's a very uncomfortable practice of literally trying to do less.
Yep. And yeah, I mean, it is a conversation I have often with clients. I have a couple of clients who maybe are experiencing, especially this time of the year, right? Clients are getting sick or injured. And it's just, I think there's a lot of pressure behind like, oh, the new year's coming. I need to get myself into gear and get myself ready to go. And I think that that also puts extra pressure on us to be moving at a certain pace when there's so many other things going on at this time. And then I don't know about you, but every year I feel like this season specifically, especially between like Thanksgiving to Christmas, like it poofs into thin air. I literally don't know where it goes. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't even really enjoy it. And now we're in January, which is when it's cold and gloomy and just the winter, like not fun. So yeah, it's definitely a lot of that side of things that I'm seeing with clients. And it's funny because my opinion on this has changed over the years, right? Like I definitely was somebody that was like, oh, like rest. I don't need rest. I just keep going. Like I can keep going. And that worked for me for a little while until it no longer did.
Right. It works for everybody for a little while. And then you're like, and now here I am, just a heaping sack of bones that can't carry on for anything.
Literally. Yes. It's almost like we need to prepare for that rest before we're forced to take it. This is something I talk about with clients a lot. Like when they do have an injury or when they are sick, it's almost like your body's way of telling you, like, you should have been slowing down. You should have been listening to me. You should have been taking this time. And instead we kept pushing, pushing, pushing. And so then we just put ourselves into sickness or injury. Whereas we could have prevented that like more serious version of it if we had maybe ahead of time done some preventative measures. And so that's a conversation I like having too, is like, that is your body's way of telling you, like, we've had enough. It's time to rest.
It's interesting, though, something that I've been exploring for myself and something I've been in conversation with clients around is the more that we can practice this skill, this art of slowing down, the more we can enjoy everything from a weekend to a vacation better. Because what I feel for myself historically and what I see in my clients is this mindset or this perception that, quote, slowing down equals slamming on the brakes, when in fact it's more a light, gentle pumping on the brakes so that you're slowing down and you're still in motion. You're still actually making progress forward, arguably maybe more progress forward than you would if you kept going and going and going till you lost control of the vehicle and crashed into a wall, which is what every single person will do if we can't find moments of slowing down.
And that reminds me too of this tool that you're probably very familiar with that we use with clients, the dial method, right? And it's like, instead of turning the dial completely off on our health and fitness, like, what does it look like to just scale it back depending on the season that you're in, right? It doesn't have to be this like, well, I guess I'm just not working out, right? It's like, no, okay, maybe I'm just going for a walk every day, getting outside for 10 minutes. Like, it does not have to be that, let me bring it all the way down to zero and just quit everything cold turkey. But instead, what does it look like for me to be okay with 50%, right? Because then I could do 50%, but then a lot of guilt and shame comes along with that, especially our people who are super disciplined and don't exercise enough self-compassion and struggle with taking things back a notch. And I know for me, that was very clear that I struggled with that, right? It was like, well, I don't know how to go for a walk and let that be enough.
Right. It comes back down to that all or nothing, black or white thinking. And so many people are like, no, that's not this, because I'm not all or nothing about this or all or nothing about this, but you're all or nothing about the entire experience. Right. And finding, I call it, the continuum, and finding that gray area in between. There's all different shades. If you were to pull out like this gradient, there's all different shades of the white all the way into the other side. And can you find like your shade, your temperature of the day, of the season, of the week, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I was just picturing like swatches in like a paint store.
That's exactly it. But I'm the worst, or have been in the past the worst. I mean, I was the queen of sleep when I'm dead. That was my mantra when I worked third shift, right? I can work overnight and then do all the other things during the day because I'm a superhero. And for the type of women that I work with, I typically attract people that have similar qualities to me. They're very driven, they're very motivated, they're very inspired by achieving. And I think that we live in a society where we perceive achievement as attached to doing. And that means that it's attached to the hustle or the exhaustion or the grind. And we don't often think or perceive that achievement can be productive rest. And that's what I like to tell my clients. I'm like, this is productive rest, because it doesn't mean that you are, quote, lazy to do things, intentionally.
Yeah, that just reminds me of something that we've recently learned was, how are you being in those moments of doing? Right? Like, how are you actually being? Like, are you like just running like a chicken without a head and just like so unintentional in everything and just checking the boxes and going through your to-do list? Or are you actually present in those activities? Right. And I think when we slow down and allow ourselves that rest, we start to realize how we can integrate that into our lives and to be more present and mindful in those current moments. And I think that raises the point that like actually rest creates more opportunities for us. And even thinking about like what an injury can do, right? If somebody's out of the gym for a few weeks because of an injury, what time does that give you back? And what can you now do with that time? How can you utilize that for something else that you enjoy doing? Or really using that time to figure out what you want and the healthy lifestyle that you want to create and what that looks like for you. So it's really interesting because, like we've talked about, right? It's definitely in society been considered no pain, no gain, team, no rest days, right? That was all of the things that we've always received, and just how harmful that messaging can be.
Right. And I know it sounds so cliche, but typically when things sound cliche, it's because they're true. But it all just comes back down to mindset and perception. You're exactly right. I've got a client who's going to visit family, and her biggest obstacle and her biggest struggle, and I could tell was causing her so much mental anguish and anxiety, was the fact that, she reflected back to me is that she was going to have zero control over the food, from the grocery shopping to cooking the food to cleaning up to everything, that it was all going to be done for her because of the family dynamic and the situation that she's going to be in. And I found it so interesting because I have no emotion attached to this. I'm completely on the outside, which is, the benefit of having support or a guide or a coach. But, she was so wound up about this and worried about this. And from my perspective, I was like, what a gift. what a gift that you get so much time where you're not going to the grocery store, you're not making the list, you're not cooking, you're not cleaning, you're not doing all the things. But our minds immediately want to point out like, oh, here's what's wrong with this. You have no control over your food. When in reality, when we can step back and say, wow, I have so much space to rest and to be present and do all the things, it gives you a greater opportunity to actually put your energy in what you do have control over. Because more often than not, we have so much more control over things that we don't even think that we have control over because we're so focused on where we have actually lost control, which ultimately winds up, going to the way opposite end of the spectrum, which is what we're trying to avoid in the first place.
Yeah, like of course she's right to feel that way, right? That's okay to feel that way, but also this provides me the opportunity to rest, to have more time to read a book or do something that she enjoys. And I'm sure as a mom, that's like something, right? That you're like, wow, that sounds amazing for someone to cook and clean and do all these things for me.
Right. All of this mental energy is not benign on, everything from self-control down to how we feel about ourselves and the choices that we make and, your long-term health and longevity.
Yep, totally. I think about this a lot in terms of like decision fatigue, right? And how, like you mentioned, we just are constantly having to make decision after decision and having to exercise that decision making can get extremely tiring. And Natalie and I both had this conversation recently because we both have clients who have expressed to us like, yeah, I feel like I'm tired by the time I've been doing this for 3 days in a row and making healthy choices. And then like, I just run out of steam, right? And I think it comes back to taking that pressure off of yourself to have it perfectly, right? To have it all nailed down and to understand that we can shift things as we need to. It might feel like you're having to make a lot of decisions in the beginning, but as you continue and as you practice, it'll become more effortless and just more habitual.
Right. And, recognizing that when you are seeking this balance between the doing and the being, both sides are uncomfortable. I think that that's another big misconception when it comes to rest. We've conditioned to believe, first of all, that rest is lazy, but second of all, that that rest is just really, really easeful. And, I was just thinking back on a conversation that we had not too long ago when we were talking about creating space. And there is, this whole mentality over, okay, now I'm resting, but what should I be doing with my rest? And that's just another way our brain is playing gymnastics with like, okay, you chose to rest, but what should we actually be doing with that? That's going to help you. And so it's a vicious cycle that we have to practice and work on as far as the mental game of it as well.
Yeah. And that's something that I've been struggling with too, is like, okay, I've taken the time and I've created pockets of space and rest for myself. And then I'm in these spaces and I feel this like immense guilt of like all the things that I should be doing. And the only time I felt like I had permission was on Monday when I wasn't feeling well from my period. I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, sure. So I felt no guilt because I was like, well, my body is actually telling me like, no, we can't do this today. But it's amazing because you're right. Like now I'm wasting all of this headspace on like, I'm not even enjoying the rest because I'm so preoccupied about all the stuff that's on my plate or my to-do list. And so in practice, this is really challenging.
And what you'll have to make up for it. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes. What you've got to make up or how you have to earn it. That was a really big shift that I had to make because back when I was a full-time personal trainer, I only got paid when I was on the gym floor training. And so I can remember so many times like taking on extra clients, taking on extra sessions and working myself in the ground to earn my rest. And I could tell myself all day long it was to create the funds in order to go on vacation or for a holiday and things like that. But I think in the grand scheme of things, while that may have played a role, that it was more just the feeling of needing to earn the ability to rest.
Totally. I'm just thinking too of like, oh, I need to fit all of these sessions in before I take off for the holidays. And then like those few days that I had of pushing were so exhausting to me that then I was exhausted for like the actual time that I had off. And I know that a lot of people feel this way, especially this time of the year, end of the year, just busyness and hecticness. And so it is a challenge. It is a challenge both mentally and physically to be able to implement this in practice. So I'm curious, like in terms of how you've been able to do this personally, whether it's rest or space or creating these pockets of time and acceptance of that, like what does that look like for you?
This is still a practice for me, but I think that the big thing that has been helpful is to create boundaries for myself. And when I say boundaries, what I'm meaning is there's no hard and fast rule. And I'll give an example of a boundary to create space and to allow my body to rest, but also, care for my body. Well, I have been working towards getting up earlier so that I can have some time for myself, whether that is space to drink coffee and peace, to read, work out on the days that I'm going to work out. And so one of the boundaries that I created with myself is I have a little one who gets up multiple times per night. And my boundary is if he gets up more than twice, then I allow myself to sleep and I create space to rest in that pocket. But the other end is to create that morning time is still for me. And it's so interesting because I think it was the second day that I did it. I was going to the bathroom. I was changing into my workout clothes. I was 6 o'clock in the morning. It was dark. I was sleepy. And I immediately had this thought and I was like, wait a minute, baby's sleeping. So I probably should do laundry or go clean the kitchen or something like that. And I had to catch myself. And I was thinking, I was like, how many moms think about this when they wake up in the morning? I'm intentionally trying to create this space for me to have whatever I want in this moment that belongs to me. And immediately my brain went to, how can I be doing something else so that I'm more productive, so that I'm like earning my value here. So that's one of the big things. And the really scary thing that I have done for myself personally, and I've never done this, again, I was the one working the day after giving birth, is I have created the conditions and the environment to take the entire week off leading up into Christmas. And that means taking off from work and doing anything in work. And for those that, whether you're a coach or you just work from home, you probably know how challenging that is. You live in your work, and just allow myself to be present and available for my family. And that's just like a really tricky little scenario. But my boundary on that is I've still created a container. And I think that that's been the key for me thus far.
Yeah, I love all of that. And I think you brought up a lot of great points in terms of if you are creating this space and trying to find these rituals, it doesn't have to be like the exact same thing either. Like, I love how you said, like, I created this pocket of space for me in the mornings, right? And instead of being like, I need to do this, like I need to drink coffee, I need to journal, I need to meditate. Like, no, I'm going to do whatever I feel good doing. And if that's working out, great. If that's instead sitting down for a cup of coffee, it's just honoring that time and that space with yourself. And that's something that I've struggled with really over the years, but more so recently have accepted that, like, I do not need to journal every single day. And I've kind of like put that as a practice that I can pull in as I want to. But instead of feeling it like it's forced, then it becomes this thing that's not productive and productive in the sense of like, it's not helpful for my rest and my recovery, right? Instead, it's just like
value.
Yes, exactly. And instead it's just like something that I need to do to check the box.
Right.
And when it becomes that, it's no longer enjoyable for me and it's no longer restful or valuable.
That's interesting. I have a sticky note sitting right on my laptop that says, does this give me life? And so it's been one of my mantras and questions. And that has been really, really helpful for determining whether or not I'm going to work out, determining whether or not I'm going to track my food for a period of time or, whatever. Is this life-giving? Yes or no. And if the answer is no, then it's an easy, hard no. I'm going to pass on that. And the trick with that is, though, you have to be willing to ask yourself hard questions, because sometimes the answer is there life in this for me? When it comes to like working out, the answer is going to be yes. And you're going to be tired and you're going to have to do it anyway. It's not, it's not a free pass to say today is just a Netflix and chill day. And so is tomorrow. And so is the next day. And so is the next day kind of situation.
Yes, it's so true. And I think that a lot of people struggle with that balance, right? Of like, and that's why we're talking about it, right? Like, how do I know when to push myself and when to rest? And I think it is extremely individualized, right? Based on you and your priorities and how you carry on through your life and all of the things. But I think that question is a great way to, and also like this concept of short-term versus long-term pain, right? Am I like just doing this or not doing this because I'm avoiding the short-term pain that it will bring? Or am I looking at the greater picture of this? Right. Am I actually looking at how this will affect me 2 years from now, 5 years from now, how I will show up for my children in the future, how it will show up for grandchildren, right? Like trying to think of it on a bigger continuum and notice that it's like more than just that moment. And I think too, a lot of people struggle, like I mentioned in the beginning, just this concept of self-compassion and being able to allow yourself to slow down, but also recognizing that there are seasons where I need to push myself or where I want to push myself, right? It shouldn't come from a place of need. It should more so come because I'm in a place where I have the capacity, I have the energy to put towards this thing, to push towards something new.
Right. And, one thing that I've had to catch myself in, and I know this is true for many people, is when you're in a season of pushing, is it out of self-care, compassion? Because, right, self-care and compassion just doesn't mean bubble baths and taking a nap. It can mean doing the thing when you're tired and doing it anyway. But does this come from a place of self-care, or am I doing this as a form of punishment? I think is a really big differentiator there as well.
Yep. And something that we've also talked about was how often people move towards goals in avoidance of something, avoiding pain or trying to get away from something,
right,
versus like, actually, here's what I want the outcome to feel like instead. And I think when we're trying to just move away from pain, it's definitely, pain can be a motivator, right? I think that's why marketing is often very pain based. People play on your pain points for that reason. But at the end of the day, if you never get to the root and solve that issue for good and really identify like, well, this pain is just not from the weight on my body, right? There's probably a lot of stuff underneath the surface that also play into that. So that pain might come back again and again, regardless of if you achieve the goal that you were striving for in the first place. And so as you guys enter 2023, I think that that's a good kind of evaluator of what you're thinking about and where you're headed next to really identify if that's something that you want to be working on.
The way my clients have responded to this is, so many of them have been like, I don't want this to be another holiday season where I'm just like, I can't do all the things. And so they just let themselves go. Going back to that dial, going back to the continuum, like pausing and resting in some areas of your life does not have to mean that you're letting yourself go. So one of the invitations that I've given so many of my clients is to give themselves space, whether you celebrate Hanukkah, Christmas, whatever it is taking that period of time and just pulling back a little bit. It doesn't matter, but just giving yourself a date that this is the day that I'm going to reemerge and I'm going to reevaluate, like, where am I? I think that the thing that people are afraid, first of all, people don't trust themselves. So they're afraid to slow down. They're afraid to rest. They're afraid that that's going to wind up, if the intention doesn't start that way, it's still going to wind up with them quitting. But giving yourself this clear boundary, like, this is my reevaluation date. This is the day that I'm going to, connect and see, how I'm feeling. And it's really interesting to me because I feel like 100% of the time when I've had clients, whether it's holidays or vacation or just a period in March, when they have pulled back and they've rested, they see so many more gains in whatever they're working towards. Like, it's like throwing gasoline on a fire right after that period of rest. And they feel so much more motivated and they feel so much more inspired versus let's hustle and grind, get through this season. And then you're like, oh, but I'm still tired and I don't want to do this anymore. And then you quit.
Yes. And I'm sure so many people can relate to this on one level or another in some area of their lives that they've been able to do this and see that kind of fold out. But I'm just thinking too, in terms of like actual things that happen in terms of like the science exercise background of like a diet break, right? So actually taking a diet break from your caloric deficit and being able to psychologically and physiologically give your body that break from a diet often ends up making the diet itself more productive in the long run. And so we see this in many different case scenarios, how this actually does provide us with more evidence that like we are able to do this. And I think, like you said, people struggle with this because they're afraid of either losing progress or they don't have the self-trust. And instead, like, I encourage people to use this rest as a chance to build that self-trust, to show yourself that you don't have to be 110% all of the time in every single area of your life, and instead can pull back and you are going to be fine. You're going to be fine. You're going to live well, and everything's going to be okay.
It's going to be better. In my personal experience, nothing ever has been really great out of me being 100 or 110%, other than just getting completely exhausted. I always tell people, I'm like 80% is a really good place to be. And I know that, again, going back to like, that's so cliche because there's the 80-20 rule, right? But for me, it has been true. When I am in there like 80%, then that's where I can find consistency. Like everybody's like, oh, you need consistency to, in order to accomplish anything. Like I don't find any consistency at 100%. And I've not seen that to be true for most of my clients either.
Totally. Yeah. And I even think about my practices, like I was mentioning before, like, this pressure to meditate or journal every single day. And I find my sessions now to be so much more valuable when they are as needed or not out of a place of forcing them to be.
Right.
And I imagine that's very similar for workouts too, especially if you want to make that more of a mindful movement session, right? Where you're actually like paying attention and like not just going through the motions, although it's also okay to just kind of check the box on your workout. It doesn't have to be this whole grand ordeal, but you can also make this more productive by paying attention to how your body feels through the movement and really connecting with that. And not necessarily needing motivation to work out, but just like, okay, I'm here, I'm present and I'm available for this activity. For example, this morning, I was not feeling like working out and I had other priorities that were kind of interfering. And even throughout the whole workout, I started my warm up and I was like, I should probably go do this other thing. And what do you know? My body was tired. I ended up pulling a muscle in my back. And it's just a reminder of like, I should have listened to myself in the first place when my body told me this morning, like, yeah, Jenna, not really feeling it. Right. But it's hard to know like what is going to be the outcome. Cause I could do that, probably 75% of the time and be perfectly fine. No injuries. And then, on occasion, my body's like, nope, you should have listened.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. I mention it all the time, but one of my favorite books, and it's such a long book, but it's a great read, is The Body Keeps the Score. And it's specifically, talking about trauma and things like that. But I think that the thing that I keep coming back to is how intelligent our bodies are and how quick we are to dismiss their intelligence or what they're trying to say. And not that that's our fault, right? There is so much noise. And I have already started cautioning people, like, if you think it's noisy right now, people telling you what to do with your body, what to put in your mouth, like January 1st is right around the corner and it's about to get epically loud. But it just illustrates how, even as fitness professionals, we know better and we still just have such a hard time listening to our body, but it's always right. It always knows and it's always right.
Well, we also have not been taught to really ever do that. Like, I don't remember growing up and learning like, what is my body telling me here? Right. And how do I use that to navigate and make decisions? Like that was not the only time that we did that was when we were really little babies and we had this own like sense of I'm hungry and I'm full. Right. And that's the only time that not that I remember it, but that like historically,
we don't remember.
Historically, that's when we've been told that we were able to navigate those things. And so we just over time get flooded with other people's opinions, like you said, and just hear all this noise that then we are unclear as to what our body actually needs at that time.
Yeah.
And you're like,
started with the Clean Plate Club.
Totally. Me too. Absolutely. And so, it becomes a really hard space to navigate. And I think just even creating awareness around this topic and even having this discussion is going to open your mind as to really what can I do with this and how can I actually like, have I been listening to my body? Like, and I think then you have the other side of the spectrum too. That's like all self-care and like all that's all we do. Like, don't push your body. And that's not where we're going either. Right. It's like, where is this happy medium of you can have it all. You can do both.
You can do it, it's both and it's something I feel like a broken record with my clients. But one thing I think is helpful, and this is not an original practice. This is actually something that started for me in therapy is, and it's also been reiterated by other mentors is having a journal, and not in a journaling practice, but a place to keep notes. And it's called an evidence journal. It's something that I use with my clients all the time, but creating evidence for, this was when I trusted myself, my body, whatever. And this was the outcome. This is the time that I didn't. And this, all these things. And it gives you the opportunity to reflect back, because again, our brains are so good at pointing out the negative or our faults, or, this, you should have done this, you should have done that. And so being able to just have written evidence to be able to go back and say, oh, but that one time that I listened and trusted myself, this was the outcome, can be really, really helpful in breaking through the noise.
So good. And such a great practice. And I think that ties this all together really well, Natalie, because I feel like this is a hard topic for people to grasp. And I feel like we've mentioned a couple of different tools throughout here, but I think tying that evidence journal in is perfect for like, how do we actually put this into practice?
Yeah. Yeah. And just remembering it is a practice.
Totally. It's a practice. It takes time. You're not going to get it right every time. You're going to go back to the drawing board. You're going to figure out what works best for you. And you're going to repeat that for the rest of your life,
Do it again. Yep. It's a journey. It's a journey, not a destination.
Totally. Awesome. Well, this was such a good chat, Natalie. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to more of our quarterly chats, just kind of what we're seeing in the space and what people are struggling with, and continuing to go back and forth on some of these topics.
Yeah. Awesome. Look forward to next time.
Thanks. If you found this episode helpful, I want to invite you into an exciting opportunity that we have at Harvest Coaching. If you've been living off of 1,200 to 1,600 calories or less because you thought that's what you needed to lose weight, if you consider yourself a healthy eater but aren't sure if you're eating enough or the right foods for your body, if you want to learn how to work with your body and not against it, if you want to improve your relationship with food and incorporate foods you love without feeling guilty, then our signature one-on-one coaching program, M3, Mindset, Metabolism, and Movement, is for you. This is a fitness, nutrition, and lifestyle program that's designed to help you let go of all or nothing thinking, optimize your metabolic health, and gain more confidence. This program is right for you if your workouts leave you feeling drained, you're tired of wasting mental headspace thinking about food, and are overwhelmed by the abundance of contradicting advice, and you finally want to feel more confident in your body and the choices that you make in regards to your health and fitness. Then now is the time to apply to our signature M3 one-on-one coaching program. This is a no strings attached process, and all you have to do is apply. Even if you decide that it's not a good fit for you after our call, there will be no hard feelings at all. You'll at least get some guidance on what you can be working on from your health and fitness professional bestie. The link to apply is in the show notes.